All right, welcome everyone. Welcome to our year-long journey on Cox campus. I'm so happy for everyone to be here today. I am so glad that everyone came in early and on time. We're excited to begin today. Today we're going to start and we're going to discuss about read alouds and how that helps to support with reading comprehension. So we're going to be thinking about those things just to discuss how read alouds in our classroom can help to support comprehension with our students. All right, a little bit about me. I have been teaching for 15 years. I've been in education for 15 years. All of that time has been in the elementary grades from kindergarten up to 5th grade, and I've loved it. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I definitely believe in equity for all of our students to make sure that everyone gets a fair chance at learning in our school systems and promoting equity in our schools. As a K-3 facilitator here at the Rollins Center, I like to going out into the field and working with teachers and working with students as well. So that is a little bit about me. All right, now I want to know some things about you. Some of you have already been putting in where you're from, but if you haven't done so already, let us know. What state do you live in, and how confident do you feel in your current knowledge around read alouds and reading comprehension? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Georgia. Very good. Always room to grow, of course. We can never stop growing. Ohio, very good. Wow, Arizona. Welcome, 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 Jackie. Okay. Pennsylvania, Chicago. Wow, we have so many people from across the states. Welcome to everyone. Very good. Well, I'm so glad that a lot of people feel confident, but like you said, everyone said you could learn more. Oh, Puerto Rico, fairly confident. Very good. All right, excellent. Okay, so before we move on, great to see new and familiar names. All right, so Cox campus, and we're just want to make sure that we're supporting our values here on Cox campus and uplifting those things that we believe in. So here you will see that we are, we think about rewarding, empowering, connecting, safe, and essential. Those are the things that we believe in here on Cox campus, and we hope to convey that through our webinars and also through our courses. All right, Cox Campus, if you have not done so already, Cox Campus is a wealth of information. Everything that's on there is research-based, it's built by educators. If you are a birth through 5 educator or a K-3 educator, there's so much information on there. There's courses, there's blogs. You could connect with other teachers on there. So if you have the time, go ahead and log in and just get a lot of information in regards to literacy. If you have not done so already, go ahead and sign up. Sign up on Cox Campus. It is so easy. There's a membership on there. It's already been dropped in, the website is dropped in the chat. And it's totally free. There's nothing that you have to do. All you have to do is sign up, and you can get more information about courses. This course is a course that's similar to this about reading comprehension on there. There's a lot of courses for families, there's courses for educators, and a lot of information is on Cox Campus. So if you get a chance, just take 1 minute. It is completely free to everyone. Go ahead and sign up. All right, so as we stated earlier before, we're gonna be talking about read alouds today. And read alouds in regards to reading comprehension. And the first thing we're gonna think about is to describe the relationship of read alouds to listening comprehension. We're gonna look at our developer plan for K3 Start Read Aloud, which is a framework to help us. And also, how can we apply and extend that read aloud after we've completed the read aloud? All right, so let's think about this. There are a lot of people said they were confident. So let's reflect on our current practice. What is your current practice around read alouds? Go ahead and put it in the chat. How often do you do your read alouds in your classroom? Put that information in the chat. Daily. Oh, someone says difficult to find time. Multiple times a day. Every morning. So that's interesting. So we went from some people say it's difficult to find time to some people say they're doing it multiple times a day. Almost daily, maybe 3 times a week. We also have a coach that's in our chat, and she says she tells her teacher to do it at least 3 to 5 times a week. Okay, excellent. All right, so let's move on to our next slide. All right, so let's think about this. What do you think, what's the difference between story time and read aloud? What is the difference between story times and read aloud? You could put it in the chat, or I believe that you are able to come off of mute and go ahead and speak as well. Okay, Mary Hunt, I see your hand is raised. You could go ahead and come off of mute if you want to. Okay, if you want to come off of mute, you can and talk to us about the difference. Okay, well, read aloud is to build knowledge. Go ahead.
I'll speak up. To me, a read aloud has purpose and intention related to the standards that you're teaching in Tier 1 instruction.
Very good, excellent. Read alouds are purposeful. Very good. And then, so then, what is story time?
Well, story time is just when they get to turn out the lights and enjoy a story.
Exactly. Thank you, Bonnie. I really appreciate your participation. Yes, story time is when you're reading just to enjoy the story, just to hear what's going on in a story with the students, and read aloud is a little bit more purposeful. Very good. Excellent. Interactive and intentional, thank you. Students have opportunities to discuss text. Yes, absolutely correct. So here we are. As most of you have already said in the chat, and thank you, Bonnie, for participating, a read aloud is an instructional strategy that's used to really expose our students to new vocabulary and rich vocabulary, because we don't always use some of these words when we're just talking casually to each other or with our friends. And so read aloud helps to expose our students to new vocabulary words. It also helps them to develop background knowledge. Some of the books that you may read, that's not information that comes up daily in daily conversation. And so Read Aloud helps to expose our students, to help them to build background knowledge, to help them later when we're thinking about reading comprehension. So you are absolutely correct. Read Aloud is a purposeful and intentional read of the text beyond just enjoying the text. Okay, so we're going to watch a video to give us more information about Read Aloud and reading comprehension.
Courses, you know that there are 5 critical reading skills identified by the National Reading Panel. The Read Aloud method is an evidence-based strategy that is effective for teaching 2 of these skills: vocabulary and comprehension. In this step, we're going to focus specifically on comprehension. According to the simple view of reading, decoding times language comprehension equals reading comprehension. Meaning, to have proficient reading comprehension skills, children need to be proficient in both decoding and language comprehension. The Read Aloud strategy helps increase language comprehension because it both develops vocabulary and strengthens listening comprehension skills. So, how do you teach listening comprehension during a Read Aloud? Through explicit modeling and thoughtful questioning. Let's talk about explicit modeling first. At certain points during the Read Aloud, you will stop and do a think aloud. Here, you will model your thought process by verbalizing what you're thinking out loud for your students to hear. This strategy helps students not only get a deeper understanding of the text, but also helps them see the process of thinking through what you read to arrive at your understanding. Let's look at a quick example.
They would think he was a piece of wood, a leaf, a flower, or even a stone. And you know what? That sounds like a problem for Chameleon, and he sometimes feels lonely because of that. And that probably makes him feel what? Sad. Yeah.
Maybe disappointed.
Maybe disappointed because he's so lonely.
The teacher paused and made a connection between a detail in the story and the character's feelings. Remember, the ultimate goal of modeling your thinking is to prepare your students to eventually generate their own thoughts. In addition to modeling with think alouds, asking thoughtful questions is another way to strengthen listening comprehension. Again, after stopping at a specific point in the text, you will ask a question. You can randomly select one student to answer, let students turn and talk, or have students do a think, pair, share. Whatever method you use, fostering a positive classroom environment is most important to help students feel safe to answer questions. Check out our Classroom Ecosystem course to learn ways to create a nurturing classroom culture. Now, let's watch as students turn and talk in Miss Rabidou's class.
Why did we say the man was probably wearing sunglasses on our next page? Why did we say the man was wearing sunglasses? When I say teach and you say okay in a very whispering voice, I want you to discuss, why is the man wearing sunglasses, do you think? Get ready, teach.
Okay.
That's a really good point. All eyes on me.
All eyes on you.
After students provide an answer, make sure to scaffold as a way to give support or provide feedback. The Start Scaffold Ladder is a wonderful resource to help you know how to scaffold support based on a student's response. You can find it linked below this step. Now that you know why read alouds are important for teaching listening comprehension, let's hear from a teacher that uses this method in her classroom.
Okay, all right. So now we know that read alouds are so important because it helps our students to be able to build background knowledge. It helps our students to build vocabulary. All right, so what does the research say? So maybe lately you guys have been hearing a lot about the science of reading, And one of the models that comes up a lot when we talk about the science of reading is a simple view of reading. Here it shows us that decoding and language comprehension equals reading comprehension. Now, we know that according to this model, if our students are unable to decode, so decode includes sight vocabulary, phonological awareness, phonemic awareness. Those are the things that come under decoding. And then we have language comprehension, which includes background knowledge, semantics, and vocabulary. These two things have to be in place in order for our students to master reading comprehension. So we have to teach both parts. Sometimes students come in and they could decode, but they're unable to understand because of language comprehension. And that becomes difficult for our students with reading comprehension. They have no background knowledge. Some students have background knowledge, but they're unable to decode. And then so reading comprehension becomes unstable for those students. When it comes to read aloud, here we have the teacher doing the reading. So she is doing the decoding or he is doing the decoding. And then students are developing that vocabulary knowledge, and they're also developing those critical skills and building those background knowledge in order to help them with reading. Children will eventually gain word reading skills that they're able to do on their own. They need to read text and to match their language comprehension. So that's what read aloud is. It helps them to develop their listening comprehension, which eventually translate into reading comprehension, because we definitely go from speech to print. If we could speak it and understand it and comprehend it, then when students begin to read on their own, then they're able to comprehend it from their own reading. So we're going to talk about repeated reads. Repeated reads. One of the things that we're going to talk about during this session is reading the book at least 3 times. Sometimes we read a book once with a student and then we put it down and we don't read it again. But I think it's important to do repeated reads because it helps our students to deepen their understanding of the book, whether it's a fiction book or nonfiction book. It helps them to understand it. And then it also helps them to build their confidence and engagement, because now that they're able to understand, we want to do an interactive read aloud where students can talk more about the book and incorporate their feelings and their thoughts in comparison to what's going on in the book. It also helps them to gain a deeper understanding of the new vocabulary that they're using. If we just read a book once and we introduce the vocabulary once, they may not remember it. But if we read it at least 3 times and have those vocabulary words available for those students, and it becomes a part of their long-term memory. So we want to be able to do repeated readings with our students. So what kind of books should we use, should we choose when we are doing our read alouds? Let's take a look at our video to help us to know how to best choose our books.
Children to be able to discuss ideas, events, and characters in the text. And of course, they should enjoy the story as well. Look for texts that represent a variety of cultural experiences through the content and the illustrations. For example, Miss Bowie is reading part of the story, It Takes a Village.
We've been gone a long time, Koku, Yemi said. Mama must be worried. But she was not. Mama knew better. As my mama told me, and her mama told her, and I will tell you, you weren't alone today, Yemi. We don't raise our children by ourselves. It takes a village to raise a child.
She then follows up with a question that connects her students' lives to a character that is from a different country.
I want to know who in your village or community or who your family members help to take care of you.
In addition, choose books that support or extend student learning and interests. For example, if you're teaching a science unit about weather, read a book that matches the topic. The students in Ms. Dawson's class are studying the civil rights movement in social studies. They are learning about Jackie Robinson. Watch how she introduces the read aloud by first making connections and tapping into her student's schema or prior knowledge.
We've learned about MLK, we've learned about Juliette Gordon Lowe, and they were all from what state were they from? Georgia. They were all from Georgia. Now, I have some background knowledge already and some schema, and I bet you do too, about Jackie Robinson and where he was born. Now, we learned that he was born in Cairo, Georgia. So let's see if we can add that to our map. Let's add Cairo, Georgia to our map here. So Cairo is about right down here, so let's add Cairo. And then let's add a little picture of Jackie Robinson because that's where he was born. We'll add Jackie Robinson right there.
Finally, when you are building your read aloud library, make sure you are balancing the amount of fiction and nonfiction text you read. This helps children develop a positive attitude toward books as a source of pleasure and information. If you're looking for a list of suggested grade level read alouds, check out the link below this step.
Okay, awesome. So this is where we're talking about what kind of books to read. Remember, read aloud is we're trying to build background knowledge for our students. So we want to be able to read a variety of books with all kinds of background. So, our background may be about science, or it could be about social studies, or it could just be a fiction or nonfiction text. Don't be afraid to read all kinds of books to help support our students, because we want them to build up all of their background knowledge with information that we're reading with them. Also, think about, when are we doing our read alouds and choosing our read alouds? Are we just sitting in during our literacy block and thinking about read alouds? Remember, you could have nonfiction books as well and read it during your science blocks, during your social studies block. And there are even books out there that help to support math that you probably could also use during that time. So think about using your read alouds across the curriculum and at different times to really help to support your students when you're doing those subjects. So read alouds does not only have to be during morning meeting or during the literacy block. You could also do read alouds with a variety of books across the curriculum and throughout the day, multiple times a day. Okay, so today we're going to think about the K3 Start Reading, which is a framework to help us to effectively develop our read alouds in our classroom. The first thing we see here is it has repeated reading. So here we are suggesting reading the same book 3 times. Remember, we said the more we read about it, the deeper the understanding becomes of our students, the more they're able to understand the vocabulary, the themes, and the concepts that's in the book. Reading a book 1 time may not help our students to really deepen their understanding. So our suggestion is reading the book 3 times. Once we've done that, we want to do the start strategy. So the first thing is to state the purpose of the book. Once you read it 3 times, you are going to state the different purpose of the book when you're reading it. The T stands for teach. That's where you're going to teach the concept that you want them to know about, or the reading strategy you're interested in having them learn about. Remember, we want our students to be interactive. So we have the ask and response. So this is not story time where they're just listening for enjoyment. We want our read alouds to be active. So we have our ask and response time during the read aloud, and then tie. How are we going to tie it all in to help our students further understand or connect that text to themselves, to another text, or even to the world? So we're going to think about that when we think about our start reading strategy. So today I am going to model for you doing the think aloud of a book, Chrysanthemum. Some of you may have heard of it. This is one of my favorite books. I love reading this book because there's so many different things that can be gleaned from this book. So many different themes that can come from this book, so many different purposes that we can use to help our students develop an understanding of a variety of things. from this book. So remember, in our START strategy, the first thing we're going to do is state the purpose. When you are looking at, and I think it's already been dropped into the chat for the Read Aloud framework lesson plan template, we want to start with stating the purpose. So when you're thinking about your read aloud, we're going to do all three at the same time. So you're going to think about, well, what do I want them to think? What's the purpose of the first read? What's the purpose of the second read? What's the purpose of the third read? The first read is usually about just reading the story so students can understand what's happening in the story. You're thinking about those vocabulary words to help them understand the story better. You have to pre-read the story so that students can understand what the story is about. Think about those tricky areas. Sometimes sometimes I've seen some teachers who may just grab a book and start reading, but really it's so important to pre-read the story through before presenting it to your students, so you could think about what might be those tricky vocabulary words that I need to extend some more with my students? What might be that tricky part that I need to explain some more to our students? So the first read is always going to be about, let's look at the story. What is the story is about? Let's think about the illustrations that's in the story that helps to support the understanding of the read aloud. Now, the second part of the second read is where we're thinking about, what do I want my students to learn? What do I want them to understand about the themes of what's going on in this book? In the book today, when I begin to look over the Chrysanthemum book, we're going to think about the character traits and how the little mouse Chrysanthemum changes as we go through the story. So that could be one theme that you want to think about as you're reading. But there's so many themes that could come from this book because it's just a great book with so many different things to think about. And then on our third read, whichever book you're thinking about, we want to think about how can we be interactive and have our students to retell what happened in the beginning, middle, and end. So the third read is very, very interactive, with the students talking about and discussing what happened in the book. Remember, this is the third read, and so by this time, students should be able to really talk about and discuss the book, because now they have a deeper understanding of the story, the theme, and they have a better understanding of the vocabulary in the book. So like I said, we're going to look at the book, Chrysanthemum. Okay, and we're going to think about, I don't know if you guys can see, we're going to think about let's listen to hear about what happened in this story. So some of you may already have heard this story, some of you may know about it. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read parts of the story. So my first purpose basically is to read the story, to think about what is the story about. Okay, so Chrysanthemum. The day she was born was the happiest day in her parents' life. She's perfect, said her mother. Absolutely, said her father. And she was absolutely perfect. Her name must be something, it must be everything she is, said her mother. Her name must be absolutely perfect, said her father, and it was. Chrysanthemum. Her parents named her Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum grew and grew and grew, and when she was old enough to participate, Chrysanthemum loved her name. She loved the way it sounded when her mother woke her up. She loved the way it sounded when her father called her for dinner. And she loved the way it sounded when she whispered it to herself in the bathroom mirror. Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum loved the way her name looked when it was written with ink on an envelope. She loved the way it looked when it was written with icing on her birthday cake. And she loved the way it looked when she wrote it herself in her fat orange crayon. Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum, Chrysanthemum. Chrysanthemum thought her name was absolutely perfect. Then she started school. On her first day, Chrysanthemum wore her sunniest dress and her brightest smile. She ran all the way. Hooray, said Chrysanthemum, school. So here, I'm even just thinking about, wow, how is she feeling at the beginning of the story? And it seems, according to the author, one thing that he does here is that he repeats his words. He says, she loved the way it sounded, referring to her name. She loved the way it sounded when her father called her. She loved the way it sounded when she whispered it to herself. And it says Chrysanthemum loved the way it looked. So it tells me that she's really proud of herself and she's proud of her name. When she began school, it says she wore her sunniest of dress. When we think about sunny, we usually think about something that's bright, exciting. You're thinking happy. And it says she had the brightest of smile. And she ran all the way to school. Wow, when you're running towards something, that means that you are excited to go and you want to get there as fast as possible. So she was excited. And she said, hooray, school. So when we're thinking about what we want our students to know, and in this case, we're thinking about the purpose is to see how the character changed from the beginning to the middle to the end. In the beginning, she seemed like she was a happy student. Then let's continue on and see how she may have changed. It says, but when Mrs. Chudd took roll call, everyone giggled upon hearing Chrysanthemum's name. It's so long. It scarcely fit on your name tag, said Rita. I'm named after my grandmother, said Victoria. You're named after a flower. Chrysanthemum wilted. Now, what does wilted mean? This is a point where you could talk with your students about the word wilted. Wilted means that she's bent over and she's down. When you think of a flower, when a flower becomes wilted, it's no longer standing up straight. It almost looks like it's about to die if it's wilted. She did not think her name was absolutely perfect. She thought it was absolutely dreadful. So once she started at school, then things begin to change. Her thoughts begin to change and her feelings begin to change. And this is a point where you could stop and think about with your students, well, what are some things that happen in school that help her to change from, being so excited to go, and then all of a sudden she's not excited anymore. The students at the school begin to talk about her. Okay. I'm going to skip some of the pages just to tell about the difference in her character. Then it says that night, Chrysanthemum dreamt that she was really a chrysanthemum, the flower. She sprouted leaves and petals. Victoria, one of her classmates, picked her and plucked the leaves and petals one by one until there was nothing left but a scrawny stem. It was the worst nightmare of Chrysanthemum's life. Chrysanthemum wore her outfit with 7 pockets the next morning. She loaded the pockets with her prized possession and her good luck charm. Chrysanthemum took the longest route possible to school. She stopped and stared at each and every flower. Chrysanthemum, 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 the flower seems to say. So here, as we're thinking about what happened to her, when in the beginning, she had on her sunniest dress and her brightest smile. And then today it says that she took the longest route home. Okay, so here we could think about modeling those thoughts to say, well, this is where it changed and how things change, and not just based on what we think or based on what the story or what we want to say, but it's what evidence from the story tells us that she has changed. What are some things that the story says that has made a difference from when she first started on the first day to where she is now? Okay. So let's think about the kinds of questions that we want to ask. We want to tap into our prior knowledge, the students' prior knowledge. We want to look at character traits, which is something that we're looking at, and changing character. And if we need to clarify story ideas and help to make connections, We may even ask our students, how did you feel on your first day of school when you came in? Let's go ahead and look at this video about asking questions with our students.
Thinking first. Critical thinking involves being aware of your own thoughts and using your prior knowledge to accommodate new ideas and points of view. Strong critical thinking skills are necessary for reading comprehension because critical thinkers become critical readers, and critical readers think critically about the text they read. Critical reading involves analyzing what's in the text by questioning whether what you read was true or false, looking for supporting evidence, and using rational judgment to decide on your own viewpoints. That's why it's crucial to select texts that are complex and multi-layered, because they provide opportunities for teachers to ask thought-provoking questions that lead to deeper thinking and powerful discussions. One way to promote deeper thinking is to ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions can't be answered with one word or short phrase answers. They require more in-depth and thoughtful responses that can be supported with evidence from the text. Let's watch as Ms. Dawson asks her students an open-ended question about the Jackie Robinson biography she's reading.
It also says here that his teammates didn't want to play with him. The white students didn't want to play with him, but he worked hard anyway to be the best athlete that he could be. But why do you think he was so determined to be a great athlete? Just think about that for a moment. Why do you think he was so determined to be a great athlete? Once you have an answer, just put your thumb up at your chest. Why do you think he was so determined to be a great athlete? And I'm gonna pull a couple names just to give me what you're thinking. Jay, why do you think Jackie Robinson was so determined to be a great athlete?
He maybe was like the person, like he was very good at each like sports he maybe played.
This question can be answered many different ways and supported by giving specific examples from the text. In addition, to promote equity of voice, she provided wait time and used her cup of names to call on students randomly. Now, it's time for a quick assessment to check your knowledge on what you just learned. But before you do that, use the resource below the video to learn more about open-ended and closed-ended questions.
Okay, so go ahead and just put it in the chat. What do you think the difference is between an open-ended question and a closed-ended question? What is the difference between an open-ended question and a closed-ended question? Or you could also come off of mute.
I'll answer.
Yes.
Well, my dog is going to answer.
Go ahead.
Let me stop my dog. I'm sorry. So, open-ended question is when the student is able to give more responses. Closed-ended will end with a yes or no. But open-ended questions allows children to expand their knowledge and to add more to the conversation.
Absolutely correct. Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing. Yes, so open-ended question usually has a yes or no to it or a single answer. But of course, a closed question, I apologize, a closed-ended question is either yes or no, and it has a single answer. Open-ended, that's where students are able to give more information and more background knowledge on what's going on. Now, what would be a good question, you think, for this story? If you already know the story, Chrysanthemum, what would be a good open-ended question to ask in relation to this story? Now, there's nothing wrong with closed questions. We could always ask that to build our students up, to ask us basic questions like, well, where's the setting? You know, they may say at school, and that's kind of closed, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we want to move them from closed questions to open-ended questions. Definitely, we want to at least try to compare and contrast Chrysanthemum's feeling, and think about, one question I've thought about, well, what would you do if you were in one of the classmates in a classroom and one of the students was making fun of someone else? How would you handle it? Would you help them? Would you sit out? Have you ever been teased in the classroom? Some of those things help. Right, and the reasons why her feelings has changed. Now, some of those things could be based on what's happening in the story or even based on the background knowledge of our students. One of the things that we want to do when we talk about responses to have partner response or group responses. And this is where you would do your turn and talks, because our read aloud is to be interactive. We want our read alouds to be interactive, once again, which is different from a story time. So before you do this, though, you have to practice that turn and talk with your students. You have to show them how to do a turn and talk and how to use sentence stems to be able to do it. So that's an example of where students will turn to each other in partners, elbow to elbow, knee to knee, and they'll have a conversation. In order for students to be able to do this has to be practiced. Sometimes we may say, well, just turn and talk and answer this question. But we want our questions and our discussion with our students to be thoughtful discussion and thoughtful questions that they will be able to share out. So you could do a turn and talk and have students talk to each other. You could do a think, pair, share, where students would think for a minute, what would I do if I was in a classroom to help Chrysanthemum feel more comfortable? Think about it, share with their partner, and then share out with the entire class. Sometimes we need to give our students sentence stems to help them to be able to articulate their thoughts more correctly. So here we have sample examples of a sentence stems that they may use: I agree or disagree, or this reminds me of, or one example of. They may even go back and think about things that has happened to them in the past. So here's one thing: we could compare and contrast chrysanthemums in the beginning and in the middle. So even using illustrations to help us to understand the feelings of the characters in the story. In the first part, we could show these two pictures to our students and have them to think about the difference in her thoughts and feelings and how they've changed, and how illustrations can also help to support what's going on in the story. So as you can see in both illustrations, the first one, it was a bright sunny day. It looks like she's leaping and dancing and ready to go to school. She's happy about it. And then in the second picture, when her feelings change, then you notice that it's raining. The story says that she took the longer route to go to school, and she is wearing all her prized possession and her good luck charm because she wants things to go well. So one question could be, well, why would she wear her prized possession? Why would she wear a 7-pocket sweater to go to school? And hopefully our students will be able to give us a thoughtful answer to that. So we want them to be critical thinkers about thoughts and feelings of what's happening to characters in the story and be able to relate. One of the things we want to do is be able to have empathy towards characters in the story, and in general to real life. Someone dropped in a comment about real life situations, to be able to have empathy towards people. Because if someone in our classroom is being teased, can we have empathy and go over and help them and support them in our classroom? So to think about those things as well. Like I said before, sometimes we may have English language learners or just other learners in the classroom that may need extra support with articulating their thoughts. Sometimes students, give one-word answers. Even if it's an open-ended question, they may not be able to answer us fully. So let's take a look at this video and see how this teacher supports her students in the classroom.
Watch this quick clip of Mrs. Weldon as she explains how she scaffolds for students that may struggle to provide a response to a question about the text.
The way that I make sure that kids are thinking critically during read alouds is I ask open-ended questions so that they can't just give a yes or no response. And if I do call on them and they do not have a response where they can explain, I can then say, would you rather this, or would it be this or this, to give every child in my room the opportunity to be able to add their input or their thoughts into the read aloud.
Very good. So that is so critical. We want to move away from just kids raising their hands and we're just picking on one student to give our answers. This is why we want to have thoughtful discussions, because if our discussions are thoughtful and complete, if we're speaking in complete sentences when we're answering, when we go to write, then we'll also begin to write in complete sentences. Remember, we go from speech to print. And so if we're speaking in complete sentences, we're going to write in complete sentences. If we need to support our students to speak in complete sentences, we could give them sentence stems and to help them to answer those questions in complete sentences. So it's okay to give scaffolds and help students to articulate their thoughts more clearly when they're sharing out. Remember, we want to move from just picking on one student to answer questions all the time. There's nothing wrong with that, but we also want to have discussion to make sure that it's interactive and all students are participating, that the quiet student that sits to the side will have an opportunity to participate because that quiet student will have a partner to pair up with, and then they'll also be able to share out, and we'll also support them with their answers when they're sharing out. So now we've come to the tie, which is beyond the read aloud. What can we do to make sure that we are still helping our students to understand what's going on in the text? One of the things is a mini lesson. The one that I talked about more was character change over time, but in this story, there's so many other things you could think about, so many other themes, bullying, teasing, what would you do differently? So how can we do retelling as an activity after the lesson?
The first activity you can do with your students is a mini lesson. This is usually done in a whole group setting. During a mini lesson, teachers provide explicit instruction to deepen and enhance comprehension skills. A mini lesson is made up of 4 major parts: direct explanation, modeling, guided practice, and independent practice. First, you talk about a reading strategy or skill, such as predicting or making connections. What is it? Why do it? When to apply it? In this clip, Mrs. Weldon explains what they will be working on and why it's important.
We have been reading the story of Ruby Bridges this week. And today we are going to use a graphic organizer to retell the story. Now, when we retell a story, that means that we are going to tell the most important parts of the story. So do we need to tell everything that happened in the story? No. We just need to tell the characters, which are the people or animals that are in the story, and the setting. The setting is when and where the story took place, and then the major events that happened in the story. Retelling is a way for us to help make sure we have understood what we read. So Miss Lisa's going to model today how to do the graphic organizer, and I'll get you to help me some along the way so that we can do it together, okay?
Next, you model how to apply the strategy or skill using Realia, anchor charts, think alouds, or graphic organizers. Graphic organizers and anchor charts are both excellent ways to help students visually explore ideas and relationships.
The next part of retelling is to think about what happened at the beginning of the story. So Miss Lisa's going to model this part and show you. So I remember in the beginning of the story, Ruby's dad lost his job because he helped farmers with crops. And they brought in big machines, so they no longer needed his help. So they had to move to New Orleans to find work. So Ruby was feeling very frightened about this new move. So that's what happened at the beginning of the story. So we don't have to write all of that, but we'll just jot down a few things from there, okay? So Ruby moved.
Then you practice the strategy or skill with students while supporting them by scaffolding and providing feedback. In this case, Mrs. Weldon asks a question and lets her students turn and talk while she gives individual feedback.
Now in the middle of the story or the text, that's where usually they tell you about the problem. That's where they usually tell you about the problem. Now I want you to think back to the story that we read of Ruby Bridges, and I want you to think for a minute about the problem, what the problem was. You can turn to your partner and share your thoughts on what the problem was. What was the problem when she moved to New Orleans?
She continues to scaffold as students share responses to the whole group.
Natalie, what do you think the problem was?
White people and black children could not go to the same school.
All right, if you agree that you think that that was the problem, give me a thumbs up. She said that white people and black people were not allowed to attend the same school. That was a law. BJ, do you have something to add?
That we can't go to the same school because Dr. Luther King changed the laws.
Who helped change these laws? He did help change a lot of the laws.
All the people that lived there.
In our text that we read today, who was part of helping change this law? Who was part of it? The judge is the one who ordered for her to be able to go to the school, and then Ruby, yes.
Then she fills in the next section of the graphic organizer based on their responses.
All right, so excellent. This is a perfect example of what we should be doing in our classroom. The key here is explicit instructions. We have to make sure that we are modeling what we want our students to do. A graphic organizer is an excellent way to help students to organize their thoughts and to think about some of the things that has happened in the story. But we cannot just give our students just a graphic organizer and have them to just go and fill it in. We have to directly model how to use it, model how to put it in. So in our story today with Chrysanthemum, we could do a compare and contrast. And that's where you may have a Venn diagram and model what does it mean to compare and contrast. What happened in the beginning, what happened in the middle. We can also do a beginning, middle, and end. How did she feel in the beginning? How did she feel in the middle? The part I didn't read was how did she feel at the end? Because it seems as if she, in the end of the story, if you've read it, if you're familiar with the story, she comes back around to feeling good about her name. But we have to make sure that we're modeling what to do for our student, explicitly modeling those things so that when they are on their own and they're doing independent activities by themselves, they know exactly what to do. So here's just an example of a retail. We can see at the beginning, she's happy in the middle, and what happens again at the end. We also have, and you could check it out on our Cox campus, a retail rubric to help your students to understand if they're able to retell. Make sure you are showing it to them in advance and letting them know these are the things that you will be looking for when you're doing a retell. This is also a graphic organizer to help your students fill in that beginning, middle, and end piece. All right, so we are at the end with the tie. I just want you to share out, what are some things you do to extend your reading activities? Do you have learning centers, writing centers, vocabulary stations? What are some things you do to extend your learning? You can go ahead and unmute, or you could put it in the chat. Share with everyone on here. What are some things you do to extend your learning, your reading activities? You could compare two books, yes. You could also do an author study because Kevin Hinkes, who's the author of this book, has great characters in all of his books. You could do a compare and contrast of the characters in his books. What else are some things you could do to extend your reading activities? Act out stories, very good. You could do readers theater. You could do a read aloud art projects. I love that you're bringing the art in to help. That's awesome. What are some other things?
Thank you all for joining us today. We'll definitely go ahead and get started. We want to respect you all's time.
Oh, come up with alternative endings compared to real life situations. Absolutely correct. And make sure that even though we didn't go into a deep dive with the vocabulary on this webinar, think about when you're doing your writing to make sure that students are also incorporating some of those vocabularies that you have taught them as well. Okay, so we could go on to the next slide. All right, also just think about your EL learners. What are some things you could do to help support them in the classroom? Remember, we talked about having those sentence stems to help them to better articulate their thoughts. We could go to the next slide. All right, so here we have a plethora, just so many good resources that is on Cox Campus. I've only listed a few here. Go ahead and look online. If you signed up earlier, remember we said it only takes a minute to sign up, and you are able to download for free all the activities, the retail rubric, the comprehension strategies, learning center activities. Everything is free on Cox Campus. All right, did anyone have any reflections or any questions before we go? You can unmute if you wanted to. Well, I definitely thank you everyone so much for coming. I encourage you to go online and look at the framework. Remember, it's just a framework to help support you in what you're already doing on in your classroom. You can also get more information about what we're doing with Literacy and Justice for All in one of our local schools here in Georgia, Marietta City Schools. We're working with them, so you could go on Cox Campus and get information about that. And don't forget about our upcoming session in January. We'll be talking about assessing students for spring assessments. All right, go ahead and you could go ahead and take the poll to answer our questions below. There are 4 questions with a poll that should have popped up. Thank you so much to everyone that has joined us today. I really appreciate it.